What makes one terrain build look like a miniature while another feels like a place you could really step into? It isn't using expensive materials or simply just adding more details and decorations. The real difference is depth. So as I build this medieval house today, I'm going to break it down into three different parts, from shape, texture, and painting. Now, each one of these steps will change the build in a different way, but when all three work together, it changes it from a piece of foam to something that feels like it has weight, age, and history. For the first layer of depth is shape, and this starts long before we add texture paint. For the base of this house, I'm starting with a simple 4-inch cardboard box. Right now, it is about as plain as a building can be. Every wall is flat, every corner is predictable, and the entire structure has the same weight and width. But that simplicity makes it a useful foundation. Instead of treating the box as the finished shape, I'm treating it as a solid core that I can build around. So, using foam board, I can begin pushing parts of the house around, raising other areas, and breaking up that basic cube. One of the largest additions is the side wing. It's giving the house a wider footprint, but more importantly, it creates a second roof line and several new places where the walls overlap. Those overlapping shapes create real shadows. Some surfaces move closer to us, while others are pushed further into the background. Even without texture, the building is already beginning to feel more dimensional. Next, I start thinking about the roof. I begin by adding a roof to the side wing first, establishing its own smaller roof line. After that, I can move on to the main roof of the original box. Because these two roof sections are slightly offset from each other, they don't form a single flat plane. Instead, they break up what would have been a large, simplified roof into multiple intersecting shapes, making the structure feel more complex and less uniform. The chimney serves a similar purpose in a different direction. The side wing carries the shape outward, while the chimney pulls the eye upward. Now, while building it, I went ahead and deliberately curved it just so it adds a bit more of an arc and it creates a bit more visual interest. Now, when it gets to actually placing all of the bricks on the chimney, I like to really slow down even more and build it brick by brick. I use Mod Podge as my adhesive, applying a thin layer and then carefully placing each individual brick in place as I work. It's a bit repetitive, but I personally think this is one of the best ways to achieve a realistic brick texture that really feels handmade rather than manufactured. Each slight imperfection in alignment or spacing actually adds to the character. That said, it does take a lot longer than using pre-textured sheets or carved foam, and because of that, I always recommend going back once everything is dry and brushing on one more coat of Mod Podge over the entire chimney. This helps lock all the bricks in place and ensures nothing shifts or falls over time. So now that we have the larger details established, the next layer that we have to get into is texture. Now, shape tells us where one surface ends and where another one begins, but texture tells us what those shapes are made of and how much depth exists within them. So here, I'm starting on the side wing with a tightly crumpled ball of aluminum foil. By pressing and rolling it across the foam, I can quickly break up the perfectly smooth surface and give it a rough, uneven character of stone. And yes, this would have been much easier if I had done it before gluing everything in place, but sometimes the order of the build is decided by when I remember to do something. The foil is a nice way to create the smaller pits and imperfections, but the individual cobblestones are drawn in with a pencil. I vary their size, shape, and placement so they don't form a perfect repeating pattern. Pressing the pencil deeper between the stones creates recessed lines that will eventually hold darker paint, while the raised faces will catch the highlights. The stones are not actually very thick, but that difference between the highlights and the lowest points helps sell the illusion that they are. Now, the boards we'll be using for this are actually leftover pieces from my previous build where I made a playable blacksmith. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out, but the wood texture itself was created using a brass-bristled brush, which I just dragged along the surface to carve in those fine, natural-looking grain lines. Now, the direction of the texture is just as important as its depth. Stone should feel irregular and broken, while wood grain should follow the length of the board. Those differences allow the eye to recognize each material even before any color is added. So as I trim each piece in place while framing the house, I'm constantly thinking about how those directional choices guide the viewer's perception. Even in this early stage before painting or weathering, the structure already starts to communicate its story just through the way the surfaces are carved and aligned. On the main section, I've staggered the roof planks deliberately, offsetting each board so the seams don't line up. That small decision adds a surprising amount of visual complexity, breaking up any of the sense of uniformity and making the roof feel like it was assembled over time rather than stamped out in a single motion. It's a subtle kind of imperfection, but it's exactly what makes miniature architecture feel believable. Okay, so at the stage that it is right now, it's pretty much ready to go ahead and seal it and paint it and get it all finished up. However, I feel that it's a little bit flat, especially on the side face here and on the front face. I'm going to start with just going ahead and tearing all of this foam off that I've already put on there and then building out a little extra wing. I'm not sure exactly what that'll look like, possibly a balcony or just another triangular type shape to pull the faces off and create a little more depth and texture on it. But I just want to try to experiment a little bit with that and push my field of depth just a bit. So that's what we're going to try now. This is one of my favorite parts of building terrain that I enjoy the most. Once the basic structure is standing in front of me, I can stop looking at it as a collection of materials and start looking at it as an actual place. That is usually when I notice opportunities that were never part of the original plan. After turning the house around a few times, the opposite side still feels a little too flat compared to the rest of the building. So I'm going to add another small wing using the same foam, stonework, and wooden trim that I've already used. I don't want this addition to feel like an exact copy of the first wing. The goal is not perfect symmetry. I simply want it to feel like it belongs to the same building. Repeating the cobblestone texture and timber framing creates a shared visual language, while changing the size and placement keeps the house from feeling too uniform. This also shows how shape and texture work together. The new wing adds another layer to the silhouette, but the stone and timber divide the larger shape into several smaller surfaces. The pencil lines between the stones create tiny recesses, while the wooden trim sits slightly forward from the wall. Each difference may only be a few millimeters, but together they make the building feel much deeper. I also decided that the front of the house needed one more feature, so I'm using the same textured wooden pieces to build a balcony. The balcony gives the front a much stronger focal point, but it also creates several new layers. The platform extends beyond the wall, the supports sit beneath it, and the railing adds another set of shapes in the front of everything else. All those overlapping pieces create real shadows before the paint is ever involved. Then the wood grain adds even smaller level of depth across the surface of each board. From across the table, the balcony changes the overall shape of the house. As you move closer, the supports, railings, and individual grain lines gives your eye more to discover. And that is what good depth can do for a build. The larger forms make it interesting from a distance, while the smaller textures reward you for looking closer. You don't need to cover every inch with detail, but you do want enough variation that the eye has somewhere to travel. It is also completely fine to change your mind while you are building. A plan can give you a place to start, but does not have to decide every part of the finished piece. Sometimes you cannot see what a build is missing until it exists in 3 dimensions and you can turn it around in your hands. Adding something later does not mean the original plan failed, it means the build gave you a new idea. As long as the new addition supports the shapes, materials, and visual style you already have, following that idea can lead to a much more interesting result. Now with the construction and texturing complete, we finally reach a stage where that depth becomes visible. Now, paint is not just a way to add color, but it actually controls how the eyes read every surface. Dark colors will push the details backwards, while the lighter colors will bring them to the front, and the contrast between those two make the shallow differences feel much deeper than they actually are. Now before adding any color, I'm actually going to coat the entire build with Mod Podge. This seals the foam and cardboard and helps protect the softer materials and gives the building a stronger surface for the next layers of paint. Once it's completely dried, I followed up with a coat of gray primer. The primer gives everything a consistent starting point and makes it easier to see any areas that I've missed. From there, I paint the entire building black using acrylic paint. This may seem like an extra step after priming, but the black is going to become the deepest layer of shadow across the entire build. Now having this dark foundation also gives us room to build the color upward. Instead of trying to paint every stone individually, I begin by sponging small amounts of red and yellow across the stonework. These colors are not meant to turn the walls bright red or yellow, they create warm undertones and subtle variations so that the finished stone does not look like one flat sheet of gray. Natural stone is rarely a single color. Some pieces contain more warmth, others are cooler, and some are stained by the materials around them. Much of this color will be covered by the next layers, but small hints will remain and make the stone feel much more varied. Next, I begin overbrushing the stone with a dark gray. Overbrushing allows the paint to catch the raised faces while leaving the black base and warmer colors visible in the deepest recesses. I then add more white to that same gray and repeat the process with a lighter touch. Because this layer is brighter, I apply it to less of the surface. Finally, I use a very light overbrushing of white to catch only the highest points and sharpest edges. Each new layer becomes lighter, but it also covers a smaller area. The black remains in the deepest cracks, the darker gray covers most of the stone. The lighter gray catches the raised faces, and the white touches only the highest points. That gradual change from dark to light is what turns a shallow pencil line into stones that appear to project from the wall. The wood will be kept much simpler. I start with burnt umber to establish a deep brown base, making sure it reaches the spaces between the boards and into the grain. Once that dries, I use nutmeg as a highlight, lightly catching the raised grain, corners, and worn edges. The darker brown gives the timber weight, while the lighter color reveals the texture carved by the brass brush. I don't need several different shades here because the wood already has a strong physical texture, and keeping the color simple prevents it from competing with the stone. Now for the walls, I'm using actual plaster as the final surface. This is fitting for a timber frame style of the building, but it also provides several practical benefits. First, it gives the walls a more solid, heavy appearance, covers small gaps and painting mistakes, and creates a slightly uneven finish that feels more natural than perfectly smooth foam board would. And the plaster will actually soak up a lot of the washes in the next stage. Now at first, this can look like far too much. The plaster will soak up a lot of the wash, and the clean walls may suddenly appear much darker and dirtier than expected. But you'll just have to trust the process and keep going on this. As the wash settles into the wood grain, the spaces between the stones, and the corners around the trim, it strengthens all of the shadows we have been building from the beginning. It also ties the different materials together so the stone, wood, and plaster feel like parts of the same weathered structure. After the overall wash, I can become much more intentional with where the weathering appears. Using the same mixture, I place it beneath the roof lines, around the chimney, under the balcony, near the windows, and anywhere where water would naturally collect. Now, paint will reveal the depth, but weathering explains how the building has existed within its environment. Shape created the layers, texture defined the materials, and now paint and weathering bring everything together into a structure that feels as though it has the weight and age of history. We've used shape to create depth, texture to define it, and paint to reveal it. But there is one more trick we can use to push the entire project a step further, and that is adding some life back into the build. For this, I'm using a fine blended turf mixture and combining it with PVA glue. Mixing the two together first gives me much more control than applying them separately. I can also pick up small clumps and press them exactly where I want them, while the glue helps the moss hold its shape as it dries. Just like the weathering, I want to focus these on areas where the water would naturally collect, such as beneath the roof lines, around the chimney, along ledges, between stones, and in the corners around the balcony. These protected, damp areas give the moss a believable reason for being there. If you want your terrain to feel more realistic and interesting, you don't always need to add more detail. Start by using shape to create real layers, add texture that helps define each material, and then use paint and weathering to reveal the depth that is already there. Finally, a few signs of life, like moss, can help connect the entire build to the world around it. If you learned anything from this build, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the Craft Cave. It really helps support the channel and lets me continue making projects like this one. And if you have any questions about the techniques I use or anything else you'd like to see covered in a future video, let me know in the comments below. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.